To truly understand the solo leveling universe, we must first start at the very beginning. No, I'm not talking about when you were born, long before that. In this video, I'll explain to you all 9 monarchs in the solo leveling universe. But first, and before we see the 9 monarchs, let's picture a universe born from the will of one entity, an absolute being. He created a world shaped by his every whim. But even perfection has its own flaws. His name is the Rulers, or the Gods of Order. As a part of his grand design, he created 2 opposing sides, the Rulers and the Monarchs. They're beings of unfathomable power, destined to meet in an endless cosmic battle, and frankly, the Rulers were growing tired of it. The Rulers were made as guardians of the light, embodiments of order and protectors of creation. They were tasked with one sole purpose, to keep existence from ceasing at the hands of the Monarchs. The Monarchs are beings of darkness. Evil sought to bring creation to ruin, but the story gets even darker. After the war had spanned on for eons, the Rulers had begun to question the true meaning of the Absolute Being's intentions. For the Absolute Being, the war did not matter in the least, it was simply for his entertainment. The destruction, the bloodshed, the endless suffering of countless worlds, and it was all a game to him. To him, this was no more than a cosmic cinema, where his creations destroyed one another. And the Rulers had had enough. They rebelled against the Absolute Being. Among the Rulers was Ashbourne, the greatest fragment of brilliant light, the strongest of them all. He sought to quell the rebellion, but was ultimately felled. In death, he realized the Absolute Being had hid a power inside of him, a power that gave rise to the Shadow Monarch. A story we'll explore later. But with the Absolute Being gone, the Rulers did not abandon their mission. To them, it was still their duty to bring balance and defeat the Monarchs. Without the Absolute Being, the universe was plunged into further chaos, and the battle between the 2 forces grew worse. The Rulers used tools left behind by the Creator to continue the war. They created armies to fight the war and manipulated entire worlds for their cause. A war that would finally reach Earth and give rise to the beginning of the story as we know it, the rise of an E-ranked hunter. Now, what about the 9 monarchs? Well, at number 9, we have Scyllad, the Monarch of Frost. The Monarch of Frost, much like the name implies, is a waking embodiment of cold. Standing as one of the deadliest of the monarchs, he embodies ice and frost, ruling over the frozen domain. A land filled with nothing but silence, where nothing survives but the layers of ice. While all the monarchs have different levels of evil, the Frost Monarch was brutal, cunning, and vengeful. He used every single thing to his advantage, capitalizing on Jinwoo's humanity. When Ashbourne, the Monarch of Shadows, turned against the other monarchs, the Frost Monarch was one of the very few who took it personally, dedicating his life to crippling Ashbourne's forces as best he could. Although he couldn't face Ashbourne in a one-on-one battle, there was still much he could do, like allying with other monarchs in an attempt to take him down. He saw Ashbourne's betrayal as an unforgivable sin, and his obsession for vengeance would ultimately lead to his demise at the hands of the Shadow Monarch. Then at number 8, there's the Monarch of Transfiguration, Yogamont. At number 8, we have the Monarch of Transfiguration. While we know very little about this monarch, there are a few details in the story that we can pick up on, and form our own opinions from there. We know that Yogamont does not like direct battles. In chapter 152, when Scyllad and the Monarch of the Frost asked for help to defeat the Shadow Monarch, he refused. He didn't think it was a good idea to fight Jinwoo head-on, but Rakan was too cocky. He claimed that the power of the Shadow Monarch wasn't fully realized on Jinwoo as a human, and it would be wise to take him out. Yogamont's ability is changing or manipulating space and time. We see him at the end of the series trying to open portals to aid Antares to bring more dragon soldiers, but Jinwoo prevented that from happening. Jinwoo's skills, Dragon's Fearsome Roar, immobilized every single one of the dragons, including Yogamont. This is the last we would see of him. Now number 7 is Ligia, the King of Giants, or the Monarch of the Beginning. While we didn't see the true extent of his power, by the time he was introduced to us in the series, he was already captured. This posed a few issues. 1. We don't know if he's the strongest or the weakest of the monarchs. As the story tells us, the Shadow Monarch goes on to say the capture of Ligia led to the collapse of balance. The Rulers went after him because he had the power to change the course of any battle. So, was he overpowered or just too weak? Fast forward to the present time, as Jinwoo walked into a dungeon, he finds the monster of a being, Ligia, tied by several chains, having been put down by the Rulers, and of course, he was suspicious even after Ligia promised to help him. I would be suspicious of a giant chained to the floor too. To gain Jinwoo's trust, Ligia cast a spell called the Pledge of Trust. This was a spell that made sure that neither of them could lie to the other, a trick that would later be uncovered by Jinwoo. As the conversation went on, Ligia would try to convince Jinwoo to free him. That is when Jinwoo found an essence stone at the back of his neck. In solo leveling, this stone would make monsters hear voices, ordering them to kill humans. This posed a very huge threat for Jinwoo, who wanted to protect humanity, so he decided to ask, "You're being told to kill the humans, right? Just like the other monsters?" With no way out but to tell the truth, Ligia tried to attack Jinwoo. Jinwoo dodged all of his attacks and in one swift motion, ended the King of Giants. And so the Monarch of the Beginning met his end. There are some theories to try to figure out the true ability of the King of Giants. Some believe his ability lies in the name Monarch of the Beginning, an ability that messes with time. This would explain why the rulers sought to capture and seal him first, due to his overpowered ability. At number 6, there's Tarnak, the Monarch of Steel, King of Monsters. In the battle against the Shadow Monarch's allies, Tarnak introduced himself as the King of Monsters, the Monarch of Steel. While Tarnak had the potential to be more, throughout the series he played a more supporting role. When the Frost Monarch asked for help in defeating Jinwoo before he could fully harness the powers of the Shadow Monarch, Tarnak was one of the first to say no. He didn't want to end up like the Monarch of White Flames. He wanted to wait for the Monarch of Destruction before launching an attack. One of Tarnak's abilities includes transforming into a monster. During the final battle, when Tarnak thought he would be facing Thomas Andre alone, he soon realized that he had been trapped when Bellion and Baru came out of Thomas' shadow. He knew then and there that he was screwed. Tarnak tried to contact the King of Dragons, but Tusk had blocked off all telepathy. Tarnak was ultimately defeated by Baru, Thomas, and Bellion. Number 5 is Karacia, the Queen of Insects and Monarch of Plagues. She's the only female among the Monarchs. In terms of attack power, Karacia is one of the strongest among the Monarchs, as she was able to go toe-to-toe with the Shadow Monarch. Karacia's ability includes controlling an army of corpses with parasites, and like her name implies, she's the Queen of Insects. This made Baru temporarily confused during this battle, as he tried to attack Jinwoo, but quickly regained his senses. She also has the ability to poison her opponents. We can see this during her battle with Jinwoo when she tried to poison him, but our boy was way too overpowered, detoxifying the effects of the poison in an instant. This made her mad as she charged at him, but Jinwoo used his ruler's authority to hold her in place, making her into mincemeat. Then number 4 is Rakan, the King of Beasts, the Monarch of Fangs. The King of Beasts is arguably one of the strongest of the Monarchs, with the very useful ability that makes him so powerful. Rakan, the Monarch of Fangs, stood tall among the Monarchs as the one who was capable of such brute force. His ability relied solely on his animalistic instincts, and of course his full transformation. Rakan had a particular disdain for the Shadow Monarch. We learned this when Sillad asked for help in defeating the half-formed vessel of the Shadow Monarch at the time. Rakan was the first to volunteer. By the time Rakan would face Jinwoo, he had fully become the Shadow Monarch, which was terrible news for the King of Beasts. He turned tail and ran, knowing they stood no chance against a full-fledged Shadow Monarch. Of course, Jinwoo chased him and made him beg, but the proud King of Beasts wouldn't stay humble for long, leading to his ultimate and swift demise. Number 3 is the Monarch of Destruction, or Antares, the King of Dragons. Aside from Jinwoo, it's safe to say Antares is the strongest of all the Monarchs. Throughout the series, we see other Monarchs waiting on his orders, relying on his strength even in absence. The King of Dragons is the embodiment of destruction, and he was truly terrifying. Within seconds of his appearance, he destroyed countless hunters with his fiery breath, including S-rank hunters in an instant. His strength was definitely not to be trifled with, as he unleashed his army of dragons to lay waste upon everything in his path. His battle with Jinwoo was almost evenly matched, but the Shadow Monarch was stronger. Jinwoo had to teleport the King of Dragons to an isolated location to battle him alone, but even at that, defeating him was no easy task. Then at number 2, there's Baron, the Monarch of White Flames, the King of Demons. Very little is known about Baron, but we do know he's powerful. During a flashback, as the Architect showed Jinwoo the past, we see Baron and Rakan trying to attack Ashbourne after he had finished destroying the army of the rulers. Ashbourne defeated Baron, leaving Rakan to do what he does best, turn tail and run once he realizes he's outmatched. Baron was truly powerful, but nowhere near the level of the Shadow Monarch. When Ashbourne asked Baron why he turned against him, his response pissed Ashbourne off that he simply crushed his head. What we see is a copy of Baron made by the Architect when Jinwoo goes into the Demon Castle to level up, and even then, he was powerful. Which brings us to the final Monarch. And finally at number 1, there's the Monarch of Shadows, the King of the Dead. He is Jinwoo. The Shadow Monarch is the most powerful of all the beings created by the Absolute Being. Unlike other monarchs, Ashbourne was keen to preserve creation and not destroy it. Before long, Ashbourne betrayed the other monarchs, making him an enemy of the rulers and monarchs. His power is darkness itself. He's able to control the souls of the dead and turn them into shadows in his employ. Ashbourne's successor, Jinwoo, was also no different, wielding his power with great ease. Ashbourne, also known as the most brilliant fragment of the light, is the strongest of all created beings. And there we have it for today's video. I hope you were entertained. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Thanks, and see you next time. Bye!